Everybody, this is my second time trying to record this video. I go by the name of Duff. I've worked with multiple Grammy Award winning artists and producers, and I want to share some insight with you about recording and mixing vocals that industry pros don't talk about on their YouTube channels. So, you know, if you're just trying to record vocals at home, let's face it, most of the time your focus is not what the instrumental sounds like. Your focus is what the vocals sound like. So with that being said, let's go to the first thing. The first thing you need to know is you need to automate your vocals. You need to automate the volume of your vocals. I don't care what kind of plugins you have, they're not as good as the human ear at determining what volume is level. So when I say that, I mean like automating your transients. Okay, if you don't, the transients are the things, the little vocal things, they kind of look like trees. Your audio, when it's scrolling across the screen or whatever, you need to automate them so that everything that's loud, solo your vocals, and everything that's louder than what it should be, or if it's peaking or clipping or whatever, you need to make a little dip in that section to where it brings the volume down until you have it's pleasant or you know, workable to your ear. That's facts. I don't care how much of a limiter you put on there, even if you have Waves Vocal Writer, it's just not gonna do it the same as actually going in there and automating the vocal. Okay. After you automate the vocal, if you have Logic or if you have Pro Tools, whatever the case may be, you want to bounce that vocal out and then bounce it back into the session. And Logic has a feature where you can bounce in place. So now you have it'll be stereo. There's a way to not make it stereo, but that doesn't really necessarily matter. Either stereo or mono, it doesn't matter. Bounce it back in place into the session, so now that you have a good even vocal. The second thing that you need to know is the difference between cheap mics and expensive mics. 9 times out of 10, the major difference between a cheap mic and an expensive mic is, and this is just a really rough overview, okay? There's a lot of technical things, but the really rough overview is this. A cheap mic is going to enhance all frequencies basically to the point where your high frequencies are harsh most of the time. 9 times out of 10, a really cheap mic is going to enhance really harsh frequencies. The best mic, in my opinion, that's the best cheap mic that I've seen anybody use. When I say cheap, I mean like dirt cheap, like really inexpensive, is the MXL 990. It's like you can find them used for 50 bucks. And they're an exceptional mic for the price. But so in that, once you've automated your vocal, you need to use a de-esser. Every program every good DAW worth its salt, all the majors come with a built-in de-esser. Now again, I recommend Waves or Slate de-essers because they're like, you know, industry standard, top of the line de-essers. But if you can't afford that and you're just using a regular, like you're using Logic or using Pro Tools stock or you're using Studio One or Reason or whatever it is, get a de-esser and put it on the vocal. It's gonna stop a lot of those harsh S sounds. The sibilants is what it's called. Sibilants, okay? So that sound that you hear in those really high frequencies. And then on top of that, you're gonna wanna do a frequency sweep to where you can pull out the bad frequencies here. Let me see if I can pull up Logic here. I don't have a vocal on this, but I have. So if I show you the EQ for this, let's see here. Right, so most of your bad frequencies, if I turn on the analyzer here, will happen within the 5 to 10K range. Okay, so when I say sweep for frequencies, what you're gonna do is you're gonna, well, can't use that one because of the shape of it, but you're going to lift it like so and then narrow it and search for that one piercing frequency, and then you're going to pull it down like so once you've found it. Okay? These are things that they are not teaching. They're teaching you about compression and EQ, which EQ is fine, and this is a part of EQ, but they're not teaching you how to search for bad frequencies when you hear a bad frequency in the vocal. Okay? Compression and EQ, mics are definitely important, but you may or may not have access to, I'm sitting at my kitchen table, you may or may not have access to, you know, $1,000 mic or $2,000 mic or whatever the case may be, so you have to work with what you have. Compression is important for warmth, for depth, for making the vocal sound even more even. But the rough step is like, it would be like, automation is kind of like chiseling for diamonds. You know, when they go into the cave and they're hacking away. That's your first step at getting the vocal to be a nice cut diamond. You don't start out at the jewelers getting the princess cut diamond. You know, you start out, the diamond starts out in the mine. So that's basically what automation is. It's the rough part of cleaning up the vocal first. And there was something else that I wanted to talk about. I can't remember what it is. Oh, stereo placement. It's the last thing I want to talk about. In your mix, you want everything to be wide in the frequency span, and this is just a rough overview of how to get your vocal right. You want everything to be wide in your frequency band, and you want your vocals to sit right in the middle of the spectrum. The lead vocal, you want to sit right in the middle. If that doesn't make sense, I will show you. I really, like I said, I really am a fan of the Waves, and Waves has Waves plugins, and Waves has S1 Imager. So what you're gonna do is, and every DAW again has a stereo imager of some sort. They may be different names, but there's always one in the major DAWs. This is the Wave stereo imager. If my phone will focus here, there we go. That's a little better. All right. So with this Waves S1 imager, you're going to take the vocal and put it right in the middle, something like that. Not too narrow like that, to where it's mono, but you're gonna want to make it so that it's in the middle of the stereo field, and everything else is panned. If you notice my knobs here, oh gosh, my knobs on my sounds are panned. I have stuff panned left and right, so that the frequency bands aren't in the middle, because you only have so much space. You only have so much space in your frequency spectrum. Okay, so that vocal needs to sit in the middle, and you know, that's basically it. If you have any questions, feel free to message me. Find me at Duff the Musician on Instagram, on Twitter, and Duff the Musician on Facebook. You know, look me up, look my music up, and I'm more than willing to help you guys out. But this is something that is not talked about with the majors on just the basics of really making a vocal really clean. You know, and you sit around wondering, why does my vocal not sound as good as the other vocals? Well, the first thing is automation. Automation is really important. That is just laying the foundation for having good vocal. If you don't automate it and then bounce it out and bring it back in, you're gonna be wondering why you have jumps, even when you put a limiter on it. The limiter can only do so much. You know, I don't care what anybody says, the limiter can only do so much. So once you go in and automate it, it makes not only does it make the limiter's job easier, but it makes it's easier on the processor of the computer. The more things you have running, the more processor power you're pulling from. Okay, so automate your vocals, get them as even as possible through human ears, and then go back and add your limiter and your Waves rider and your compression and all that stuff. But the first step should be automation, chiseling away at those really high volume parts of people when they sing or rap or whatever the case may be, or even speak if you're doing spoken word, to clean up the vocal first. Okay? Love, peace, be blessed. I'll talk to you people later.